Secret Service has shot and killed an armed man who was attempting to enter Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago property in Florida. It's reported the 21-year-old came from a family of Trump supporters.
The U.S. Secret Service says it has shot and killed an armed man in Palm Beach, Florida, after he entered the perimeter of President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort.
The man shot and killed outside the president's Florida home early yesterday. Officers say he had a shotgun and was carrying a gas can.
Right now, I want to talk about one of the biggest and most serious security events in the United States this week. A breaking story that has captured national attention and raised a lot of questions around security, presidential protection, and how U.S. law enforcement handles threats. In the early hours of Sunday morning, February 22, 2026, federal agents and local law enforcement officers responded to a security breach at Mar-a-Lago, the private club and estate in Palm Beach, Florida, owned by former President Donald Trump. This wasn't just a small incident. It was a major breach of a high-security presidential property, and it ended with an armed man being shot and killed by the U.S. Secret Service and a Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputy. Today we're going to go through this event piece by piece. We'll cover what happened, when it happened, who was involved, why it matters, and what questions remain unanswered. We'll talk in real, simple English so you can easily understand every detail, and we'll also add context so you know why this is such a big deal for people in the US and around the world. Let's begin. It all started in the middle of the night at around 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, February 22nd. At that time, most people in Palm Beach, Florida were asleep. It was dark and the streets were quiet, but inside the secure perimeter of Mar-a-Lago, something serious was unfolding. Security personnel detected a man near the north gate of the property, a spot that is normally protected by multiple layers of fencing, cameras, and sensors. This man was not supposed to be there. He was carrying two items that immediately raised alarm among law enforcement: a shotgun, a long, powerful firearm, and a large gas canister capable of holding fuel. Security agents saw him, they approached, and they ordered him to drop both items immediately. At first, he did put down the gas can, but then something happened that changed everything. Instead of dropping the shotgun, he raised it in a shooting position toward the agents. This is a critical moment. When someone points a firearm directly at trained federal agents, especially at the home or property connected to a former president, both former President Trump and his wife Melania Trump were in Washington, D.C., not in Florida. Now let's talk about who the man was, what investigators have been able to tell us so far. Officials say the man was in his early 20s and had been reported missing by his family just a few days before the incident. While authorities initially did not immediately release his identity because they needed to notify his next of kin, law enforcement sources have since identified him as 21-year-old Austin Tucker Martin from Cameron, North Carolina. Here's what we know. Martin's family reported him missing shortly before he appeared at Mar-a-Lago. Investigators believe he may have traveled south from North Carolina to Florida on his own. Somewhere along the way, he acquired a shotgun. How he got the weapon and where he bought it is still part of the ongoing investigation. Authorities are now reviewing what his motive might have been, why he did this, what he planned to do, and whether he acted alone or with some other purpose. Right now, those questions are still under investigation by the FBI, the Secret Service, and local law enforcement. Let's pause and think about this for a second. We are talking about a 21-year-old young man who was reported missing by his family, and then a short time later, he breached a secure presidential property carrying a shotgun and a fuel can. That's not something small or random. That's something that would immediately trigger the highest level of response from federal law enforcement. And that's exactly what happened. The Secret Service is one of the most trained and experienced protective agencies in the world. Its job is to protect current and former presidents, vice presidents, and their families. Because of this, they train for exactly these kinds of dangerous situations. Once the man raised the shotgun in a threatening position, they had no choice but to respond with lethal force to stop a potential attack. This is the same kind of decision that law enforcement officers are trained to make in life-or-death situations when someone poses an immediate threat. Now let's talk about another important point: the timing and context of this event. President Trump is no stranger to threats, and he has been a target of violence, threats, and assassination attempts in the past. In fact, while he was running for president in 2024, he survived at least 2 assassination attempts that were publicly reported. Because of those past events, security around him and his properties has always been very strict. Agencies like the Secret Service are extremely alert to any possible threats, especially at high-profile locations like Mar-a-Lago. This week's incident is part of a wider pattern of increased threats and political tensions in the United States, especially directed at political figures and political locations. Many experts are now looking at this event not as an isolated situation, but as part of a growing concern about political violence, instability, and targeted threats against leaders and public figures. Let's break down the security elements of the event, because this is something a lot of people are curious about. Mar-a-Lago is not an ordinary property. It's a private club and estate, but it also functions as a former presidential home and a high-profile location that draws attention. That means the perimeter is monitored by multiple security systems, cameras, sensors, and patrols. There are multiple layers of fences and gates designed to keep unauthorized people out. Secret Service agents and local law enforcement work together to keep the property protected whenever someone important is expected or known to be present. Despite all of this, the man managed to get inside the secure perimeter. That means he passed at least 1 or more security checkpoints and was inside the protected area before law enforcement could stop him. That fact alone has investigators asking more questions about security gaps, how he got through, and what could have been done to prevent this breach. Now let's talk about the broader reaction to this incident. Government leaders, law enforcement agencies, and national security experts have all weighed in since the story broke. The Secret Service, in their official statement, emphasized that their agents took action only after the man raised the weapon and posed a threat. They also noted that no protectees were present, meaning there were no people they were actively protecting, like the former president, at that specific location when the incident happened. The FBI, which is now leading the investigation, has asked local residents in the area to review their home security camera footage in case it captured useful evidence. And at a press briefing, Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw made it clear that this was a serious security incident and that investigators are treating all aspects of the case with the highest priority. Let's take a moment to talk about what we still don't know. As of now, authorities have not publicly announced the exact motive of the man, why he chose to do this, whether he acted alone or had help, where and how he got the shotgun, whether he had specific plans beyond simply entering the property. All of these questions are still under investigation by federal authorities. It's common for major law enforcement investigations to take weeks or even months to fully understand the motive and circumstances behind such an event. Now let's look at why this matters, not just locally in Florida, but for the entire United States. First, this incident took place at a high-profile location connected to a former president, someone who still plays a major role in national politics. This makes the news national news, not just local crime reporting. Second, it shows that even very secure places can be breached, and that law enforcement agencies must constantly adapt to new threats. Third, because the man was so young and had been reported missing by his family, This incident raises deeper questions about mental health, social isolation, access to weapons, and how people who are struggling can end up in dangerous situations with tragic results. And finally, this event comes at a time when political tensions in the US are very high, and political violence has become a major concern for many Americans. The fact that someone would attempt to breach a presidential property with a weapon is a stark reminder of how fragile public safety can be during tense political periods. So what happens next? Law enforcement agencies will continue the investigation. The FBI, Secret Service, and local police will gather security, camera footage, vehicle records, phone and digital data, witness accounts, and any other evidence that can help explain why this happened. At the same time, federal authorities will review all of the protocols and response procedures to understand if anything can be improved in the future. Agencies may release additional information once the investigation is further along.